Okay, so we're now on the stage where we create an app for our project, and we'll go through that, and we'll sort of we'll talk a bit more about it as we go along. So what we have is we have a base project at the moment that's going to contain all our apps inside it. So to start off, then I'm going to go back to Atom, and let's open my project here. So at the moment we're in this folder, and you can see that we have just our project. So we have our settings file and our URLs file, and those are our two important files at the moment. So here I'm going to go back to creating let me push Control and C, which will stop the server, because a second ago I was running the web server. So now it's cancelled, and I can carry on editing my program through the terminal. So I'm going to say Django -admin, and I'm going to say start app. Okay, and I'm going to create a few apps as we go along, just for demoing purposes. And I'm going to call this first one reviews. Okay, so now what happens is, if you see here, our main project now is in a folder called programming project, as you know. Alongside that, it's created this other folder called reviews. So if you remember, like I said, this one has a settings and a URLs file, which are important files. If we open up the reviews one, the reviews one also has a few bits. So it's got the views file that I mentioned earlier. It hasn't got a URLs file, so we're going to need to create that. It's got something called a models file. We're going to go through the models later as well. So the models is how we set up our database structure. So yeah, first thing we need to do is we need to register our app. So if I go to the settings in the programming project, let's open that up, and I need to scroll down to where it says installed apps. So if you remember earlier, I told you that Django has a whole bunch of built-in apps already. So for example, the admin is one side of it, so administrating your website, the back end of stuff. Authentication is another one, and there's a whole bunch more. Yeah, so let's add on our new one. So we created this app, and it's called reviews. So I'm just going to say reviews, and I've got to put a comma on the end because this is a list, as you can see. I'm going to save that, which now means that it should now be able to see, and the rest of the program here, this whole project should be able to see this new app that we've created called reviews. Okay, so let's close that. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is inside the reviews folder, I'm going to create a URLs file as well. So there's a URLs file here, and I'm going to create another one inside this app. So this is the URLs that should work inside this app. So I'm going to say urls.py. Okay, and literally what I could do is, let's just borrow some of that stuff. Let's borrow that. Let's close the one in the project down, and let's paste that in. Now what I need to keep here is I need to say, actually, from Django.urls, in fact, let's delete that first line. We're going to say from Django.urls, we're going to say import path, and also include. We'll go through this in a second. And we also want to say from dot views, from here import views. Okay, so basically what this means is the dot means folder wide, directory wide. So from this directory, so here, okay, what you want to say is import the views file, and the views are where we're going to keep our functions to run and generate each page. So we'll come back to that. We'll come back to that later. We don't need it now. And then obviously I copied that from the project one. I want to change that. So what I want to say is, what I want is when there's nothing on the path. So if you remember when we had our website, yeah. So basically, if we're at the root directory, like that, if we were at the root directory and there's no extension to the end of the address bar, then what we want is we want to say, if that's the case, let's run a page. Let's call it views dot home, and let's give it a name as well. So name equals home. And again, we'll make some sense of this in just a moment. Yeah. So what I'm going to say is, from the views file, we said that we're going to import the views there are, and what we're saying is that when the path in the URL is blank, then look inside the views file, okay, and we're going to load up a function called home. Okay, so we'll come to that. Okay, so my next thing now is I want to go to the views file, and I want to create a view so that I can generate a page. So here I want to say define, just like how we would in Python. I'm going to say home, because if you remember, in my URLs file, I said that the function I want to call is home. So inside the views file, call a function called home. So I'm now creating that. I'm going to say home, and we're going to say request. Whoops, if I could spell request, and we want to say once that is run, oops, once that is run, I want to return render, and I want it to render my request. We're going to come to what this means in a second. And then what I'm going to do is I'm gonna say that this exists in reviews / homepage. Let's call it home.html to keep it simple. Okay, so now obviously when we created the URL, we didn't create the home function yet. So now we've created the home function. So here we have a function called home, and when this is run, it should return a page. It should render a page called homepage.html. Okay, so now we've done that. Let's create the page. So inside my reviews folder, I'm now going to create another folder called template. This may not be the best way to do this. There are different ways and different places to put your templates. I'm going to say inside the templates folder, create another folder called reviews. This is an odd way this works, I'm sorry. Reviews, and then / home.html. Okay, so inside my reviews app, I've got a folder called templates. So this is basically saying these are the templates that these are the HTML templates, and I've got another folder called reviews, and I might go into that later. You don't have to know why right now. Oh, it's created a folder. It shouldn't have created a folder. That should be a file. Let's delete that. My bad. Let's delete that. Yes, move to trash. And inside the reviews, I'm creating a file this time, and it's going to be called home.html. So now I've got that HTML file, so that when I call my view, when that home function is called, it's going to look inside the reviews. It's going to look inside the reviews app, inside the templates of the reviews app, and it's going to run a HTML file called home. So let's do a test. Okay, so and this is one of the great things about Atom. If I type in HTML, it's kind of started auto-filling for me. If I hit the tab button, perfect. It's done the basic stuff for me. Yeah? So I'm just going to say, let's put a heading in here. So H1 again, let's auto-complete that. H1, let's just put some generic heading. So reviews, homepage. Okay, and that's cool. I'll leave it at that. So let's save that, and let's go to views. Let's save our views. Let's go to URL. We'll save our URL. Now, so now we've created a URLs file inside the reviews app. Okay, and it has its own templates, so it has its own paths. If you remember, we had one here as well, and this one has its own paths. So there's a problem at the moment, yeah, because when the project runs, it looks inside the URLs file inside the project. What we want it to do is we want inside here to also load up the URLs file inside the app, because each app might have its own pages. Okay, Okay, so to do that, I'm going to go back to my project URLs. Let's open that up. And on a new line here, I'm going to say path. So basically we're creating a new path, and we're saying that this path is, we said blank. Okay, so if it's blank, it's got nothing. We want to say include, include reviews dot URLs, and then we've got to put a comma on the end because this is an array and a list that can keep growing. Okay, so what we're basically saying here is, inside our project, we also want you to include all the URLs, so the URLs inside the reviews app. So, oh, and I'm leaving something out. I've also got to include, so as well as path. Okay, I've used this, I've used the include function, so I've got to import the include function. So let's save that, and I can close that. So now what should happen is when I run my project, the URLs file here should tell it to look inside the URLs file inside my reviews app as well. And let's test it out. Okay, so let's go back to our our project here, and let's type in manage.py and then run, my bad, run server. Hopefully if there's no problems. Okay, our server's running. Let's go back, and now if I run it, so there's nothing on the URL, our home page has appeared. So let's go through this for a second. Yeah, so in fact what I'll do is, let's add them side by side for a second. Let's add, let's go back to that. Yes, and let's load up Atom for a second. So if you remember, what we said was when we type in our URL, okay, we send a request. So inside the browser, I typed in the URL and there was no extension. So it looked inside the URLs file inside the project here, and it saw that if there's nothing, all right, I want you to include the reviews URLs. So basically go to the reviews app and open the URLs file there. So it went out, it went into the reviews app and it opened the URLs file, and it said basically, again, if the extension is nothing, then go to the views file and open up a function, open up a procedure or function called home. So it went into the views file and it found a function called home. Okay, so it basically continued that request. Okay, and that request was that there was no extension on the end of the URL. So the request is that it's run that function now, and it's returned a render. So it's basically rendering a page, including the request, and there's more to do with the request that we'll touch on later. It looked inside the reviews folder templates and it returned a page template called HTML. So it went into the templates inside reviews, in reviews, and it found the home page HTML, which just has that heading, which basically just returned our page for us. So that's the basics of how we generate a web page. Right, so that's it for this particular part. We'll continue again on our next video.